So I am recording, but feel free to pause or feel free to interrupt me because I can always pause the video and re-record. Anyway, we're gonna have a test this Thursday, and on this test, we need to be able to take information that I give you about a line, and then be able to rewrite it in all three forms. Right? The first form, not that we learned, but the first form you should most of the time use is point slope form. When I give you a point and a slope, you plug it into point slope form. What is point slope form? It's this guy right here. Y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. So if you have a point and a slope, you plug in your slope right here and your x and y from your point right there, and you'll have it in point slope form. From there, the second one down is slope intercept, because all you got to do is distribute the m to both terms, and then whatever this is, do the opposite of it and move it to the other side, and you will end up with y equals mx plus b, y by itself, which is slope intercept form. And the third form, if you distributed and if you moved and you got y by itself, now if you want it in standard form is simply ax plus by equals c. So all you'd have to do is move this guy to the left side. Then you'd have your ax on the left side plus by equals c. Okay. If you notice, point slope is written in red and blue because the point is in red and the m is in blue. Right here, this slope intercept is written in blue and red because the slope is in red, and the b is the y-intercept. Okay, standard form doesn't have any blue or red because you cannot see any slope and you cannot see any y-intercept. Okay, or any point. Anyway, let's begin this review by tackling one of the most challenging questions you're going to have on the test this Thursday. Please feel free to copy this down. So, what could I do here? If I tell you that your line passes through these 2 points, now it does say write it in standard form, but don't even worry about the form right now. What should I do with 2 points? Yeah, you're going to use a slope formula. If you forget, look at the back part of the board over there. It says this. It tells you exactly what to do. Number one, first find m, all right? And then after that, you could take your m and your point, you could plug it into point slope form, and then you could distribute the m and move that over, and you'll have it in y equals mx plus b. And then you could move the x term to the left side, and you'll have ax plus by equals c. This is all on the board, so if you're ever stuck, you don't know what to do, you could always read the board. So it does say on the board, first find m, okay? And in order to find m, when you have points like this, you're going to have to label those points, x, y, x, y. This is your first point, put a 1, 1. This is your second point, put a 2, 2. So the slope we're going to find using the slope formula. And the slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And when you use the formula, I recommend rewriting it with blank spots. And then, of course, identify what goes here. The y2 goes right here. So that's really a -4. The y1 goes right here, which is really a 4. And at the bottom, we have the x2 on the bottom left. x2 is -1, and x1 is -9. And when you do the math, whenever you have the minus, you change it to plus, plus. Up on top, we're going to end up with -4, take away 4, that's -8. On the bottom, you have a -1 plus 9, that's a +8. So our slope is really -1, because -8 divided by +8 is -1. Everybody understands how to find slope? And that's really the only thing you could do with 2 points besides graphing them, right? But graphing them is not going to help us, so we found the slope. There we go. Now let's move on. And again, what do we do next? If you're stuck, you could just look at the board, and it says, first find the m, and then step 2, plug in the point and the slope into the point slope form. So even if you're totally lost, you could just read the board and it'll tell you what to do. So we're going to jump to point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. And when you use point slope form, I recommend rewriting it with blank spots and then identifying your x1, y1. Where the heck are you going to get that? From the first point that was given to you. So you're going to put what right here? A 4. Yeah, okay, so let's put the 4 right there. It's the y1 value of 4. How about the x1 value? What's the x1 value? -9, and that will change to a +9 because of the minus changing to plus plus. What about that m that goes right here? What's an m? We found out with the slope formula that it was -1, so we're going to put that right there. And that is our point slope form equation. Now, if the original question said to write it in point slope form, of course, right here I highlighted that it says standard form. But if it said point slope form, you would type this in and you're done. And some of the questions on the test, some of the questions on the practice test will be write it in point slope form, and that's it. So it'll be a lot faster than what we're about to do right now, because right now it's asking for standard form, and I put this on purpose so we could go through all three different forms. Again, if you look at the board at the back, we already found the slope. We did point slope form. After that, you're going to distribute and isolate y. So you're going to distribute and then isolate y to get the y by itself. And then after that, we're going to move the x term to the other side. So we still need to go through slope intercept and standard. Here we go. So let's do what the board says, distribute. So take that -1, -1 times x, that's negative x. -1 times 9, that's negative 9. Bring down the equal sign, bring down the y minus 4. So you distributed, now you got to isolate y, that's what the board says. Let's get rid of that minus 4 by doing a plus 4. And we do to one side, do to the other side, plus 4 over here. You now have y isolated. You have y by itself. It says y equals the negative x, and then the negative 9 plus 4, that's a negative 5. That technically is slope-intercept form. So if they asked you for slope-intercept, but they don't, they're asking for standard. But if they did ask you for slope-intercept, then this would be your answer. So we still need it in standard form. So if we look at the last part right here, it says on the board, move the x term to the other side to get it in standard form, okay? So all we got to do is move the x term to the other side by adding x, cancels out, adding x. Now here we have our standard form equation, x plus y equals -5, standard form. This question actually does encompass everything you need to know. If I give you 2 points, you start with your slope formula. Once you have your slope and a point, you're going to go for point slope form, plug it in. And once you have it in point slope form, distribute and isolate y, and then you'll have it in slope intercept. And then after you have it in slope intercept, move that x to the other side, and then it'll be in standard. Okay. Now, again, I went through all three forms in this question. Sometimes I'll just say write it in point slope form, and this right here would be your answer if I told you to write it in point slope form. Or I may ask for it in slope intercept, and you would stop right here, y equals -x minus 5. But right here on this one, I did ask for standard, and this is, you got to go all the way to standard, okay? Let's move on to the next question. Everybody jot this one down. This one's interesting. It's pretty much the same question as the previous one that we just did. However, a lot of times we're so used to just like cranking out the math, like just doing the math over and over and over, that you forget to stop and think about what information is actually being given to you, okay? And this is one of those questions where if you just take a moment and think about what's actually being given to you, you'll be able to answer this very quickly without doing any math, to be honest with you. Does anybody notice anything special about these coordinates, about these 2 different points? Anybody notice anything? They have the same y value, right? So just by knowing that, we're able to give the equation. Now, in order to understand the equation, let's think about it visually, right? Let's actually do a quick little sketch right here. Well, where is this? This is at -3, 4. Okay, so if I go -3 on the x, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the y, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my dot right there. That's -3, 4. Okay, now what about the other one? How about -2, 4? Well, that's -2 and 4 also, and that's the dot right next to it right there. What kind of line is that that goes through those 2 red dots? It's totally flat. It's horizontal. And we should all remember that flat lines do not have slopes. The slope is 0. It does cross the y-axis where? At 4. So it's as easy as this. The equation is y equals 4. Any horizontal line that crosses the y-axis is going to be simply y equals that number. As a matter of fact, this visual that we just drew right here was just to get you to understand it. But the reality is, just by looking at these 2 points, if you notice that the y values are the same, then the equation will be y equals that same y value 4. Does that make sense? Now, what if I had, like, what if the 2 points were this? What if it was like -2, 3, and 7, 3? Then what's my line going to be? The 2 y values are the same. So what are you going to write? Y equals 3, right? It's that easy. What if I had like 8, -4, and 2, -4? What's my equation going to be? y equals -4, right? Now you could think of this visually. You go to 8, you go to -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's over here. If you go to +2, -4, 2, -4, it's that flat line crossing the y-axis at -4. So it's y equals -4. Make sense? Now, there's no math involved. So hopefully you guys understand what I just explained. Now, let's say you don't realize that, okay? Let me just scratch this out. Let's say you don't realize that. Let's say you didn't even sketch it. Let's say you're like, I'm just going to do what I normally do. Well, you'd go m equals division, subtraction. You would go y2, which is 4, y1, which is 4, x2, which is -2, x1, which is -3. Change the plus plus. Right here, when you're doing this slope, you should see that there's 0 on top over 1 on the bottom. And 0 divided by 1 is 0. So that should, if you didn't notice it already, that should tell you that the slope of 0 is a flat line, right? So then you should be able to think about that situation. Now, even if you didn't think about that situation of a flat line crossing the y-axis at 4, if you kept going and went for point slope form, y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1, and you actually plugged in the 0 right here, and you plugged in your x1, y1, the 4, and the -3, and you change that there. Well, when you distribute, 0 times x is 0x, which is no x's, and 0 times 3 is 0. So you'd end up with y minus 4 equals 0. And to get y by itself, you would add 4 to both sides, and you'd get y equals 4 anyway. But that's a huge waste of time if you just knew that these 2 points have the same y value of 4. That must mean that our equation is y equals 4. I hope we understand that. Let's check this one out. This one's very similar to it, but what do we have the same y value on this one? No, what do we have? Same x value. So what's the equation going to be? X equals 5. Done. No math. Instant. You're going to be able to answer this one math question in 1 second. Once you understand that if the x's are the same, you're going to have x equals that number. If the y's are the same, you're going to have y equals that number. Now, let's actually go through to visually understand this. This first coordinate is 5, 7. So you go 5 on the x, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7 on the y, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's way up here. 5, 7. That's that red dot. And if we go to the next one, 5, -2. 5, -2. It's right here. What kind of line do we have here? It's totally vertical, right? Totally vertical. That blue line that's vertical that crosses the x-axis at 5 is x equals 5. But you didn't even have to draw that. Once you know that if you have the same x value there and the x value there, it's just going to be x equals that number 5. X equals 5. Cool? All right. Now, if you did not notice that, and you're like, okay, I do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, you're going to see that the slope is undefined. You get a 0 underneath, which means it's totally vertical, which you should be able to get to the same place anyway. Moving on to another. Copy this one down. It says, write an equation in any form of the line that has an undefined slope and passes through -11, 7. So what the heck does it mean that our slope is undefined? So an undefined slope means vertical. It's so steep that you can't define it. Like if you're trying to climb a wall, it's straight up and down. That's an undefined slope. So you need to know that right here, I'm telling you that the slope is undefined. So that's going to be a line that goes straight up and down. So you got to actually think about this visually. Where is -11, 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So -11, 7 is right here. And we just said that an undefined slope is a vertical line going right through that value. So what is the equation of a vertical line? We just said it. X equals, where does it cross the x-axis? At -11. There's your answer, boom. So some of these questions on the practice test are going to be that easy, where if you understand what you're reading, you don't even have to do any math. Like that first question we did everything. I gave you 2 points, you found the slope, using the slope formula, you plugged it in a point slope, changed it to slope intercept, changed it to standard. Some of these, if you understand what you're reading, you should be able to just answer it without doing much math. Check this one out. Go ahead and copy that one down. if you wanted to speed up the copying process, you could just say the point is 4, 3. You know that the point that you got is 4, 3. And what does perpendicular mean? Whenever I tell you perpendicular, that means opposite reciprocal slope. It's on the wall, right? And even if you're like totally stuck, you're like, what the heck do I do? Well, if you look at the wall, step 1 says first find M. Now, you don't have 2 points to use the slope formula, but you know that perpendicular means opposite reciprocal slope of whatever the slope is of the equation they give you. And this is the slope that they give you, -2. So what is our slope going to be? Opposite reciprocal. Opposite of -2 is positive. Reciprocal means you got to flip it. So you're going to change this and flip this. So what's it going to be? +1/2. Okay, so there's our slope. That's what it says on the wall. First, find the slope. We just found the slope. And then once you have the slope and a point, x1, y1, on the wall it says plug it into point slope form. And when you use point slope form, please rewrite it with blank spots before plugging in. That's what I always do. Go ahead and plug in the 1/2 right there where the m belongs. Go ahead and plug in your x1 value of 4. Wait a minute, your x1 value of 4 right there, and your y1 value of 3 right there. And now it's in point slope form. And you know what? I didn't give instructions here. It says write the equation. If it would have said in point slope form, this would be your answer. Okay. What if it would have said in slope intercept form? Well, slope intercept, you don't want the parentheses, so you would distribute, and then you would get rid of the 3, right? Some people don't like distributing a fraction. You could multiply everything by the denominator of the fraction to temporarily get rid of the fraction. Okay. I would just multiply it through. As a matter of fact, here, let me show you. Y minus 3 equals 1/2 parentheses x minus 4. I want to do the same question 2 different ways. One way is to multiply everything by 2. But if you multiply this fraction by 2, you don't multiply these guys by 2, because whatever you do to this outside guy, it's like if you did it to the inside guys because of the distributive property that has to happen. So if you get rid of the fraction, multiply everything by 2, but not what's inside of the parentheses. That'll cancel out. So you'll have 2y minus 6 equals 1 parentheses x minus 4. And that's really easy to distribute the 1 now. Distribute the 1, you still have an x minus 4, and you'll have 2y minus 6. That's if you prefer to get rid of the fraction. But I would actually just distribute the fraction. So this is what I would do. I would just distribute 1/2 times x, 1/2 x. 1/2 times -4 on the calculator will give you a -2. Bring down the equal sign to y minus 3. Okay. And then I would get y by itself by adding 3. So add 3, add 3. You now have your slope intercept form equation, y equals 1/2 x plus 1. So I would rather distribute the fraction, but if you don't like fractions, you could multiply everything by that denominator. That would get rid of the fraction, but multiply that by 2 and that by 2. Don't multiply the inside of the parentheses by 2. You'll end up with this, and now you could still get y by itself by moving the 6 over. And then you would have 2y equals x plus 2, and then getting rid of the 2, dividing by 2, dividing by 2, dividing by 2. It takes longer if you decided to get rid of the fraction. There's an invisible 1 right there, 1/2 x plus 1. So notice it's the same exact equation. Y equals 1/2 x plus 1, y equals 1/2 x plus 1. But if you distribute the fraction, if you're not afraid of that fraction, you actually get done quicker. But if you hate the fraction, you could get rid of the fraction by multiplying everything by the denominator of the fraction. Anyway, if I did ask for slope intercept, then this would be your answer. If I asked for standard, then you don't want fractions, so you'd have to get rid of the fraction by multiplying everything by 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. You'd have 2y equals 1x plus 2. And you'd have to get the x to the left side. So you would subtract 1x, subtract 1x. So you would have a standard form equation of -1x plus 2y equals 2. That's your standard form. Or you could multiply everything by -1, and you have a positive x minus 2y equals -2. That's another acceptable answer for standard form. Anyway, I hope I didn't bore you with that, but yeah, I give you the slope indirectly because I tell you the word perpendicular. That's opposite reciprocal. Once you have that slope and that point, plug it into point slope form. And then if I ask you for point slope form, that would be your answer. If not, you got to change it the way I did to all the other forms. Jot this one down. This one's an interesting one. Here's another one of these questions where you have to understand what they're giving you. Anybody have any idea what to do here? And if you don't, you could just read the board. What does it say? Find the slope. That's what it says. Okay, so do we know the m? What is the m? 4. It says slope is 4. Okay, that's great. Now, what's step 2 on the board? Plug in the m and your point into point slope form, right? So do I have a point? Do they give us a coordinate like 2, 3 or -5, 7? Not directly, but they do tell us this, that it has an x-intercept of -3. So what the heck does that actually mean? That is a point. That is a location, but you need to understand what that location is, okay? So if I think of an xy plane, and I tell you that it has an x-intercept of -3, 1, 2, 3, this is my location. The question is, what is that point as an actual coordinate? That's -3, 0. So you do have a point. The point is -3, 0. And that's your x1, y1. So just like always on the board, find your slope. We already found it. Get your point. We got it from that information that they gave us. And now we could jump into point slope form. And when you use point slope form, again, rewrite it with blank spots. That way you could easily plug in your y1 value of 0. Should do that in red, keep it color coordinated. The m value of 4 and the x1 value of -3. And of course, the minus negative, you have to change the plus plus. What form do they want it in? Do they want it in point slope? If they said point slope, then that would be it. You'd be done. And some questions will be right in point slope. Right here, I asked for slope intercept. So I don't want parentheses. I want y by itself. I want y equals mx plus b. How do you get rid of the parentheses? You distribute. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 3 is 12. Bring down the equal sign, the y minus 0. And then on the board it says isolate y, get rid of this number by doing the opposite, but it's 0. You don't need to do anything. It's just y is already by itself. Y take away 0 is y. So there's your answer. Slope-intercept form. If they would have said standard, subtract 4x, then it would be in standard. Let's move on. Right here it says, write an equation in slope-intercept form of the line that has the slope of 2 and crosses the y-axis at -3. So this is another one of those questions that if you don't take a moment and think about the actual information they're giving you, you may do a lot more work than necessary, okay? So like a lot of us are like, well, I need to find the slope first, and they give me the slope. Okay, that's great. And then a lot of people say, well, I need a point. That way I could use point slope form. And they kind of give me a point. They tell me that it crosses the y-axis at -3. So if you think about that, it crosses the y-axis at -1, 2, 3. What is that point? That point is 0, -3, correct? Now, you may use the point 0, -3, and you may jump right into point slope form. However, if you take one moment and think about what do they actually give you here? That's the y-intercept. And what is slope-intercept form? Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And why do they call it slope-intercept form? Because m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So if I tell you that it crosses the y-axis at -3, I'm actually giving you the b value. And you already know the m value. So you already know your answer. What's your answer going to be without doing any math? Y equals 2x plus the b value, which is -3. And that's it. That's your answer. Now, if you wouldn't have noticed that, if you would have said, okay, I have my slope and I have my point, let me go for point slope form and then change it to slope intercept, you'd get the same answer anyway, okay? But what I'm saying is if you just carefully read the question and understand what they're asking for, you're going to be able to do some of these without doing any math. Like right here, you didn't need any math. They gave you the slope, and you think, hey, wait a minute, that's the b value. And they wanted y equals mx plus b, so there's my answer. Y equals 2x minus 3. Y equals 2x minus 3. And of course, there's going to be some questions where they just tell you rewrite this in the standard form or in the point slope form or whatever. I don't even feel like going over this one. It's so easy. Standard form, you don't want fractions. You want the x's and y's on the left side and the number by itself on the right side. So if you don't want a fraction, you'd multiply by 3 to cancel it out. Times 3 on the y, times 3, you'd have 3y equals 2x minus 12. And then move that 2 over to the other side. And you'd have negative 2x plus 3y equals negative 12. And if for some reason it's multiple choice and you don't see this answer there, they may multiply the whole thing by negative 1, changing all the signs to a positive 2x, a negative 3y, and a positive 12. That might be your answer. But this is also correct, right? But there's going to be some easy questions like this also. Just change it from this form to that form. And here's another one that also is a lot easier than you think, because they tell you that write the standard form equation of the line that passes through this point and is perpendicular to this equation. What's the first thing you do? You could read the board. What does it say? First what? Find your slope. Now, what is our slope? Do they give us a slope? They tell us that our slope is perpendicular to this guy. So perpendicular means opposite reciprocal. If it would have said parallel, it'd be that exact slope. Keep that in mind because there will be some that say parallel. Parallel, exact slope, perpendicular, opposite reciprocal. So opposite would be a negative. Reciprocal would be 4 over 1. So the m is actually just negative 4. Okay, so we have our m equaling negative 4. And what else do they give us? They give us a point. But if you take a moment and think about what that point is, what is that point? 0, negative 5. Now, whenever you have a 0, any number, you know that 0, negative 5 is right there on the y-axis itself. So they're giving you the b value. I mean, you could say, oh, that's the point 0, negative 5. And you could use that as x1, y1. And you could use the slope to use point slope form. But it's easier to just skip that and go right into slope intercept form, because you know your b is negative 5. So whenever I give you a 0, number, then that's technically your b value. Your b value. So if you know your m and you know your b, then you could write your equation in y equals mx plus b. Are they asking for y equals mx plus b? No. What are they asking for? They're asking for standard form. Standard form means no fractions and your x is on the left side with your y's and your number by itself on the right side. So we'll go plus 4x plus 4x. 4x plus y equals negative 5. There's your standard form equation. Done. So if you really think about what information is being given to you, you'll be able to do certain shortcuts that make things a lot faster. You could have gone the long route and said, okay, I know my slope is opposite reciprocal. I know my slope is negative 4. And I know my point is 0, negative 5. You could have gone for point slope form. And then you could have distributed and isolated the y. And you would have ended up with this anyway. We just skipped that whole process by understanding that this is actually our b value. And we know our m, we know our b. We could write it in point slope form. I mean, slope intercept form. All right, guys. I hope this helps. Let's get started on the actual practice test and study it and ace the test the day after tomorrow.